All right, so today we're diving deep into, well, a pretty dark chapter, I'd say, in early American history, the Powhatan Uprising of 1622.
Yeah, definitely a pivotal moment. And we've got some really interesting source material to dig into.
We do. And, I think what makes this deep dive so compelling is that we're looking at how this period of, I guess you could call it tentative peace
Right.
between the Powhatan Confederacy and the Jamestown colonists, how it just completely erupted into violence.
Yeah.
It's a story that I think really forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about, well, colonization in general.
Absolutely.
So to set the stage, we're talking about the early 1600s, the very beginnings of the Jamestown colony. These English settlers are, trying to make a go of it in this new world.
A very new world.
Yeah. And of course, they find themselves interacting with the already established power in the region, the Powhatan Confederacy.
Right. A powerful alliance of over 30 Algonquian-speaking tribes.
Exactly. So, when we think about the relationship between the Powhatan and the settlers, it's easy to assume that it was just instant conflict, like a clash of civilizations right from the start. But from what I've been reading, that wasn't entirely the case, was it?
No, it's actually much more nuanced than that. In the very beginning, there was a certain degree of pragmatism on both sides. The Powhatans saw potential benefits in trading with the newcomers.
Oh, interesting. So they weren't just immediately hostile.
No, they saw an opportunity, right? They could get things like metal tools, weapons, things that they didn't have access to before.
That makes sense.
And for the English settlers, well, they were desperate. They needed the Powhatans' help to survive. I mean, they needed their knowledge of the land, their agricultural expertise.
I mean, yeah, they were totally reliant on them, weren't they?
Completely. They wouldn't have lasted long without that initial cooperation.
So this period of, I guess you could call it uneasy coexistence, how long did that last?
Well, it started to unravel pretty quickly, unfortunately.
I can imagine.
As the English settlement expanded, more and more settlers came from England, right? And they all needed land to farm. And that's really when the trouble began.
Yeah, because they're encroaching on Powhatan territory now.
Exactly. They're pushing further and further into Powhatan lands, disrupting their hunting grounds, putting a strain on resources. Try to put yourself in their shoes. Imagine your own home being slowly taken over by strangers who don't understand or respect your way of life.
It's hard to even fathom. And, that must have created a lot of resentment, a lot of fear amongst the Powhatan people. Was that kind of simmering resentment the direct cause of the uprising, or was there like a specific trigger?
Well, tensions had definitely been building for years.
Yeah.
But I think a turning point came with the death of Chief Powhatan in 1618.
Okay.
His younger brother, Opechancanough, takes over.
So a new leader.
Right, and Opechancanough, he had a very different perspective. He saw the English expansion as an existential threat to his people, to their entire way of life. And for him, driving the English out was the only option.
So this is where it gets, this is where it gets really bad.
Yeah.
I'm eager to hear more about how the uprising actually unfolded. Can you walk us through, like, the events of that day?
It was March 22nd, 1622. The Powhatan launched this incredibly coordinated surprise attack.
Oh.
It targeted English settlements all along the James River, simultaneous attacks at multiple locations, men, women, children. They didn't discriminate.
It sounds horrific.
It was. The attacks were brutal. Entire settlements were just wiped out. By the end of the day, over 300 colonists were dead. A quarter of the colony's English population.
A quarter? God, I mean, the impact of something like that it's just, I'm struggling to even grasp it.
It was devastating.
So what was the immediate aftermath? What happened to the colonists who survived?
They were traumatized. I mean, can you imagine? They're huddled together in fortified locations, terrified of another attack, grieving for their loved ones. The initial response was just shock, disbelief, and then rage. An absolute burning desire for revenge.
Yeah, I can understand that. So how did that manifest itself? How did the English respond?
Well, first, reinforcements and supplies arrived from England. They needed to bolster their numbers, right?
Yeah.
And then, fueled by that anger, that thirst for retribution, the colonists launched a series of brutal campaigns against the Powhatan.
Oh, God.
Attacking villages, burning crops, seizing land. They drove the Powhatan from their homes.
It sounded like any hope for any kind of peaceful coexistence was just completely shattered at that point.
Oh, absolutely. And the English crown, they were alarmed by the scale of the uprising.
Yeah.
It led to a shift in their tactics, a much more aggressive approach. They saw the uprising as justification for even more expansion, even
Mm.
more subjugation.
Right.
Treaties were made and broken, and the concept of reservations started to emerge. It was a dark turning point.
Yeah. And, one figure who really stands out in all of this is Governor Francis Wyatt.
Oh, yeah,
He
White.
was the one who implemented that scorched earth policy against the Powhatan, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was ruthless, burning fields of corn, which was their staple crop, driving them deeper and deeper into the forests.
It's really a story about the tragic consequences of
Yeah,
this clash of cultures. And yeah, I think it raises so many questions about the very nature of colonization.
absolutely.
So, for our listeners, what do you think are some of the key takeaways here?
Well, I think the Powhatan Uprising it's not just a single event. It's this flashpoint that really illuminates the deep tensions inherent in colonization,
Right.
the clash over land, over resources, over ways of life.
And the violence that can erupt from that clash.
Exactly. And it forces us to think about the what ifs. I mean, what if those early interactions had been based on mutual respect, on understanding?
Yeah.
Could things have been different?
It's a question that, it haunts this whole period, doesn't it?
It does, and it makes me wonder, how much of this conflict, how much of those echoes of broken treaties and forced removals, how much of that is still impacting Indigenous communities today?
It's a really powerful thought. A lot to consider there.
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
And on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this deep dive. But for all of you listening, I really encourage you to keep digging. Maybe look into those specific treaties that were made and broken, or explore what's being done today, in terms of land rights, reconciliation. It's a history that's still very much alive.
Yeah,
So thanks for joining us, and
and keep questioning, keep learning.
keep diving deeper.
Exactly.